and welcome to Your Career. Today we find out what it takes to create an efficient home office, and we speak to the executive chef at one of the world's best hotels about his career in the kitchen. But first, it takes about 7 minutes to make or break a first impression, so you'd better be sure your shoes are shiny and your tie is clean. The image you present to the world is an essential part of your own personal brand, so it pays to get it right. To show us how, we are joined today by personal branding specialist Sue Currie, joining me in studio, and in our Melbourne studio, media trainer and communications expert Andrea Clark. Well, thanks very much for joining me today. I might start with you, Sue, and just personal brand. We hear it a lot.
Yes.
What is it? What does it mean?
Well, essentially, it's what you want to be remembered for. It's what you're known for. So essentially, it's your mark or your identity. It's how people know you. But more importantly, it's what you want to be known for. So it could be, physically. It could be through a signature style or a look. It could be just through your personality, the way you act. It could be through a name, for instance, for an entrepreneur, something like that. Or it's just a trait that you have that you're known for. So just to give you an example of someone I worked with in a corporate environment, I'd say her major brand was just friendly. She was someone who smiled all the time, always greeted the newcomer, was always very welcoming. So I'd say, welcoming, friendly was part of her brand attributes. So that's what she was remembered for.
Andrea, how difficult is it to build, if you like, a personal brand, a sustainable personal brand?
Well, James, I don't think it's very difficult if you've narrowed down those keywords that you actually want to build on. So once you've established what words you want to be familiar with, or what words you want to be associated with, then it's really up to you to build pieces around that to make sure that you can be consistent and to make sure that that is how you're actually perceived in the workplace.
Is it difficult though, Andrea?
Look, I don't think it's difficult if you've got a strong sense of self-worth and your actual goals, career-related goals, are specific. So, I mean, for example, if you're an accountant and you want to work at PwC, for a decade, then establishing what's important to you and what's important to the values of that particular company is going to help you drive an image that is successful and has longevity.
So it's about being very sure in your own mind what it is that you want to build around you, if you
Absolutely, but it's also about authenticity and understanding your own values. So Andrea's right there. It's looking at the values of perhaps a company that you may be working for, but understanding your own values. So some of the processes that you can go through is just to really think about words to describe your brand. What would be some of those adjectives? And it's quite a difficult process, but it's a bit like any consumer brand. If you think about the descriptive phrases that you would use to describe that brand, and also get feedback from other people, honest feedback if you can, about how they would describe your brand as well. And essentially you can come up with lots and lots of words and condense that down and condense that down. So, for instance, that girl who I said was welcoming, friendly, that was innately who she was. But she might add in professionalism and, get the job done, to be diligent, to be organised. So that's how you can start to develop your authentic brand.
A few people might be sitting watching and thinking, well, why? Why is it important? Why do I need to cultivate a personal brand?
Well, I think essentially the short answer is that it does open up opportunities. So if you're, if you're known for a particular value, if you're known for particular skills, well, people will come to you. And say you're, particularly for entrepreneurs or CEOs or people in a maybe more high-profile environment, it can open up business opportunities. So you are the go-to person for that particular area of expertise, or you're known for that particular skill that you may have.
Andrea, has it gained importance in recent times, or is it something that's always been up there, if you like?
Oh, I definitely think it's the profile, an individual's profile has been really lifted and put into the spotlight, especially with social media, LinkedIn, profiles on LinkedIn. I think with the greater visibility of those profiles, the individual becomes more visible.
Social media, Sue, it's key, isn't it?
It is. It's certainly key to having a profile, as Andrea said, and it's also key to get it right to a certain extent. So if you are wanting to become known in a particular area, you should embrace social media. Doesn't mean to say that you don't embrace mainstream media, because that's still important if you're at that level. But to start out, have, you know, in the very basic instance, if you're a professional, is to have a professional LinkedIn profile and to have a professional presence on Facebook, or choose not to do very much on Facebook if that's part of your brand as well.
Is it easy to get it wrong?
It can be easy to get it wrong, but it's common sense.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, not everyone has common sense, but essentially, you're not wanting to post things out there of, you know, drinking and knees up on a Saturday night, particularly, if you're wanting to work in a corporate environment. So it is pretty easy to get it wrong, but you shouldn't get it wrong.
Andrea, personal presentation, grooming. It's something that it seems pretty obvious and straightforward, but many get it wrong. How important is it, I suppose, in terms of that first impression?
Absolutely, and this is the number one concern I hear from HR managers who I talk to every week, that their staff just are not getting it right, which is really interesting. And I think it's like any other part of a skill that you build. You need to allocate time to it. You need to understand that when you change jobs and even change careers, then you have to really stop, spend a couple of days thinking about what is the best look for you, book into a hairdresser, book into a makeup artist, book in to see a stylist, and develop and work on that presentation that's going to work best for you at that point in your career.
What do you see as some of the biggest mistakes men and women make when it comes to personal presentation?
I think not being coordinated, not wearing clothes that are actually tailored and flattering, but also equally as important to that is an ability for people to communicate with authority. So, you know, I think that there's a big lack of emphasis on the training that people need to actually communicate effectively within the workplace.
So is it the old adage, dress for the job you want, not the job you have?
I think so.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, Andrea.
Go ahead, Sue. Well, I was going to say that I think it's a cliche, but I think it's so incredibly true. And I think that if you're aspiring to a higher position, then you should be looking the part, because then you'll actually generate that confidence within yourself to really achieve it.
I agree, and I think for career starters, they sometimes get it wrong. They certainly don't really know what to do and what the expectations are. But I think one of the things that they can do is to, like researching any job, you'll go onto the website and you'll research the position or the job or the company that you're working for, and oftentimes there will be on that website, for instance, the values, the culture of the organisation, and there's often images there. Now, we're all pretty much a visual lot, so you can get a sense of the visual impressions that that organisation has of how they want their people to appear and how they want to dress. And if you go into the career section of some of these websites, as I said, you'll see those values and the brand attributes, and you can package yourself up accordingly to that. So if it's professional, if it's we instill, you know, trust and integrity, some of those words, if you think about those words and how you would display that, that's you know, that's really key as well.
Is it equally, be careful how I put this, is it equally as important across the sexes? I mean, in terms of, I suppose, presentation and so forth. Is it more difficult for women? Guys put on a shirt and tie and a suit and away you go.
Oh, they both can get it wrong. Guys can get it wrong too. I think the biggest thing for both men and women is probably sometimes a little bit untidy and also lack of a good fit with what they wear. So guys can get it wrong. Yes, they can wear shirts and ties, and pretty well that's okay. But, you know, iron your shirt. It doesn't hurt to iron your shirt. And they often wear the too tight, skinny jeans. I see that all the time. Or sometimes guys have put on a little bit of extra weight and they might be wearing, you know, a shirt or a jacket, but, you know, it's
a bit snug.
It's a bit snug, and or they've got the muscles, so they can get it wrong. Women do have that tendency to dress a little bit more casually sometimes, and that can, you know, I've seen instances where women go to work in a corporate environment and, you know, might be wearing shoestring straps, whereas, you know, opposed to somebody else is wearing a skirt and a shirt that will look much more presentable. So not being too casual and having well-fitting clothing is key.
Andrea, is it getting more difficult? I mean, for example, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook CEO, he famously goes to work in pretty much the same blue T-shirt and a pair of jeans. I mean, there seems to be these industries now where dressing down is the way to go, and if you're dressed up, you're going to look out of place.
Well, I actually wondered, James, if he was this non-conformist, in the very early days before he started making money. But I'm not really sure that's a great example for other Gen Ys or anyone for that matter to follow, because unfortunately, I think the reality is that people do make sweeping judgments against you based on the way that you dress and based on the way that you communicate, whether that's through your body language, your use of language, or your vocal techniques. So all of these things are sending signals to people around us, and we do have to be acutely aware that people will make judgments based upon those actions.
Yeah, and also with Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, when you talk about people judge you on your communication, etc., even he actually wore a suit when he got married. So it was about being suitable for the audience and the guests, and it was about respect. So, yes, he might just be the leader who wears a hoodie all the time, but even he's dressed up for that particular occasion. So it was showing respect to his bride, to his guests, to the people in that environment. So that's about, the non-verbal communication, if you like. Outside
of clothes and so forth, I mean, what are some of the other key outward presenting elements that people should be aware of, Sue, when it comes to branding?
Well, again, it's about communication. It's about being able to be comfortable and be able to articulate what it is that you... I guess if you've got this brand, to be able to live up to that brand. So, deliver on what you say you're doing. So, for instance, just to give you an example of a woman who had a senior role, a senior position, but in that senior leadership role, she didn't want to step up and do presentations. She hated doing presentations to the board or even to present a business case in front of colleagues. She felt very uncomfortable doing that. So she wasn't demonstrating those leadership qualities that were suitable for that role. So sometimes I think you've just got to step up and learn new skills. So, and Andrea's the expert on presentation, but it's really more about stepping up, taking control of what it is that you're wanting to be seen as, and actually stepping into that role too.
Andrea, I imagine it can be easier said than done, particularly if there is an innate fear, if you like, of putting yourself out there.
Of course, and people are naturally petrified of public speaking or speaking in any context where they're really in the spotlight. And for a lot of women in particular, they have to realise that there's no point in upping your leadership skills and going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on leadership camps, upskilling in all of these areas and then failing to actually communicate that knowledge. It's a way that women really tend to sell themselves short in the marketplace. And so I think we've got to look at focusing equally as much on that communication part as we do on all the other content that we build as we go along in our career.
We're almost out of time, so just quickly and finally, Andrea, your number one tip for somebody wanting to build their own personal brand, your number one top tip?
Dedicate time to training in learning how to communicate effectively.
And Sue, yours?
And just step back, take a look at what it is that you want to portray and put across and how you want to build your reputation.
Fantastic. Well, we do have to leave it there, but Sue Currie, Andrea Clark, thanks very much for your time today. We are going to head to a quick break. Coming up,